So we're not going to be talking at a complete adult level. We are going to keep it pretty child-friendly. However, there might be a mention of some concept that some parents may not want their child to be thinking about right now. So this is your warning to decide what you want to do. Do you want them? But, my own kids are here probably somewhere, so I'm keeping it child-friendly. But it is a serious discussion, but it is directed towards the parents. So, Brother Khalid, did you start? Okay. Okay, so maybe about 2 months ago, I came across this book, and this book is called How to Talk to Your Muslim Child About Adulthood. Okay, so I kind of covered up because of the kids here, I don't want to go in and make them starting to wonder. So if you just search up a book by Firoza Osman. You know what? I know there are a lot of kids here as well. So what I'm going to request is all the brothers on that side, we have plenty of space here. If you can all move up here. And any sisters that find it too hard to pay attention upstairs, you're welcome to come downstairs and join us on this side, inshallah. So we're going to use a word which all of you as adults understand. And we're going to call it the act. Okay, everybody understands the act. So when it comes to the act, is it a positive thing in Islam or a negative thing in Islam? Okay, raise your hand if you think it's a negative thing. Raise your hand if you think it's a positive thing. Okay. So I see kind of young people saying positive, old people like, I don't know, what if somebody takes a picture of me saying, yes, it's a positive. So, of course, it is extremely positive. It is a blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's just that we're not ashamed of it or embarrassed about it. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the human being. The only thing that we are kind of using these euphemistic expressions is so that there are kids here and we don't want to spark something in them earlier. So this author who wrote this book, Firoza Osman, so she is involved in education and specifically involved in this type of education. Now, in her introduction, she says that she was teaching a class in the UK on education about this matter. Okay, you know what it's called. And inside, part of this was certain demonstrations of doing certain things in order to let the kids know what safe practices are. So there were 2 young girls who were hijabis in that session who participated very little, and probably due to shyness and modesty, they were very uncomfortable being in this class. However, she says at the end of that year, there were 2 teenage students who were carrying something inside of them. And guess who those 2 students were? Those 2 hijabi girls. So the point that she's trying to make is that if you try to put your head in the sand and pretend like if we don't tell them and if we don't talk about it with them, they're not going to find out about it from anywhere and they won't be exposed to it, you are wrong. And she has lots and lots of statistics, surveys, lots of stories, lots of students that have shared their stories with her about what the reality out there is. And the only conclusion is that parents need to either do it themselves, educate their children about the matter, or they need to find a way or someone to actually educate their children as the first session and then continue and keep that conversation open. If anybody feels shy or embarrassed to talk about this topic, remember that this topic is mentioned many, many times in the Quran itself. Many times in the Quran itself, and of course in the Sunnah, so many times. In fact, there are some hadith where someone came and they wanted to ask the Prophet ﷺ an extremely, you could say, expressive type of question, like very, very open, very detailed type of intimate type of question. And they started off with saying that, Ya Rasulullah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not shy to speak the truth. And here is a matter that's affecting us, so we need to know what the truth is. We need to know what the truth is. So they would ask that question with this framing that, hey, you know what, if we need to know, we need to know. And this is something that is part of who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made us to be. So another famous hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that when your child turns 7 years old, what should you do? Teach them to make salah. And when they turn 10 years old, then what should you do? Okay, so at the age of 10, if they still don't pray, then you have to discipline them. What else do you have to do at this time? The hadith mentions. Yes. Separate them in their beds. So once a kid is 10 years old, they're not supposed to be sharing the same blanket with any other child. Okay? Now, what do you think this is a reference to? This is a reference to a child growing up, them becoming aware of their body, them becoming aware of other people's bodies, and it is now not a good time for them to be sharing a blanket where they mistakenly touch something and then they start thinking about it, and it might start them off on a certain track. So at the age of 10, children are supposed to now have their own bedding. So they could be sleeping in the same area, they used to do that, but each person should have their own blanket or cover or whatever, so that is what basically keeps them within. Also, we have a number of very explicit, direct, straightforward ayat in the Quran. And remember that this act has come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for procreation and for pleasure. And it's a good thing, and the desire for it is normal and natural. If you think about it, God forbid if somebody was afflicted with some sort of sickness and they did not have any desire for this, their parents would take them to the doctors, they would try to get them medications, they would say, hey, we need to get this problem fixed. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not tested someone with this problem, so this is actually a ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it just needs to be handled in the proper manner. Now, what she does is that she wrote this book and she divided it into 3 parts, in 3 chapters. The first chapter is it's called The Challenge of Raising Children in a Digital World. And basically, this is a direct reference to all of the evil that is now accessible to your child due to the digital devices. You could have protected them and kept them in a safe environment before the digital world, but now they are accessing everything and anything. And as a result, one of the biggest problems is that, and that's one of the books that we covered before, if you remember, it was called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, that sometimes our kids, they come across bad pictures online. They're not necessarily looking for it, but they come across it. And of course, those people who are promoting those type of things, they have technology, they have research, they have data that they are using different techniques to actually reach children, because they understand that if we can get a child to be locked in, then we will actually have this person for a long time. So there is a lot of addiction to looking at bad pictures among teenagers. And this is a very severe problem. However, she says that if you find out, God forbid, if you find out that your child has been looking at stuff or has been searching for stuff, then how does a old school desi parent respond? I don't know why you guys are laughing. What's so funny about this? The old school parent pulls out the stick, bans everything, wants to break all of their devices. Now, after doing all of this, do you think that kid actually stops doing it? It can't. In fact, the reality is that once an addiction develops, once an addiction develops, that addiction is often not even in the control of that person. So when a certain trigger happens, after that their brain basically puts them on autopilot. And it's really, really difficult once that person has an addiction and they have been triggered for them to stop themselves from doing so. I've talked to people who had other types of drug addictions, and I tell them that, hey, you know that it's wrong to do it, right? He's like, yeah, I know that it's wrong to do it. So why do you do it? He's like, when I get that certain thought or I see something that sparks that trigger in me, after that, it's like my brain shuts down and it says, go and get it right now. I can't think clearly. I know it's wrong, but at that time, I just can't control myself. So this is essentially what addiction is. So she talks about the dangers, and it's not just that, though. It's also a lot of other things, like a lot of negative talk, a lot of bullying, a lot of. She talks about desensitization by gaming. Okay, so a lot of the boys are playing games, and in these games, you are regularly killing people. And that's also a danger of the digital world, that this is not something that's supposed to be taken lightly. And now, one of my big problems with this very, very popular game called Fortnite is that I haven't seen if they still do it, but until recently, when you kill somebody, you actually stand on their dead body and you dance. And these dances became so catchy that kids were doing it in the masjid when they would have a tit for tat type of thing, and I just beat you. They would start doing that Fortnite dance in the masjid, and it's extremely insensitive, insulting, humiliating to the other person. But basically, Fortnite was, they were doing this where once they kill somebody, they stand on their dead body and they dance. So she talks about other things as well, and then she says that, okay, now before I go to discussing the actual issues, she says in chapter 2, let me tell you that the only way that you can handle this area is by building a strong connection with your child. And she has an entire section from page 43 to page 70, so that's about 27 pages, about building a strong connection with your child. That if you don't have that strong connection, you can give them all the books that you want, you can tell them all the right things, but if you don't have that friendship level type of relationship with each other, a relationship of openness and honest relationship with each other, where your child can come and talk to you, not be judged. If you don't have that relationship, then you can send them to the best schools and best teachers and all of that. It's going to be very difficult for you to really maintain your positive influence on them. The brothers on that side, if you would like to come on this side here, and any sisters that are cramped up there, if you want to come out and join us there, you're welcome to do so, inshallah. So she talks about that when it comes to our children, when our connection, we need to have them connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to connect our children to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and she gives a lot of very good and clear examples and methods of doing so. Then she talks about connection with the self, meaning building the child's own self-esteem. Okay? Now, one of the reasons why a lot of children, they fall into bad things is because of a lack of self-esteem. So, if you see someone who is an engineer, and they're working at a gas station, pumping gas in cars, what would you say to them? You'd say, hey, why are you doing this? And this person says, well, you know what? I don't think I'm going to get an engineering job, so I just took whatever I could. And you'd say, hey, this person, they look at themselves too lowly. They are much better than that, and this basically means that they don't have self-esteem, self-confidence. They have lost it. So now they look down upon themselves, and as a result, they could be doing much better, but they're just going to whatever is available easily. The same thing happens with kids, and this parents have a role to play in building the self-esteem of the children. That if they feel like I am not smart enough. I am not good looking enough. I am not worthy enough to have someone really good and respectable and all of the good things that we like to encourage our kids to, they will basically say, well, since I am not good enough for all that, let me just get what's easily available. Let me just get easily available. Who's going to marry me? But here, this girl wants to be friends with me. She wants to hang out with me. Let me just go for that. Basically, they will go for low-hanging fruit because of low self-esteem. So it's really important to give positive messages to our children and build up their self-esteem that, you know what, you are worthy and you will have the best of the best, but you have to withhold yourself from having temporary enjoyment. You want to have instant gratification, but if you can delay that, then you will have long-term permanent gratification, which will also be pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this second chapter is very important. First, I was like, this looks like I'm reading a book on parenting. And the reality is that it is a book on parenting. That if you don't improve your parenting techniques with your child, then you're not going to be able to have an effect on them. So then she continues, and then she talks about chapter number 3, which is how and when to talk about the act. And in that, she talks about what developments happen to a child at what age, and what you need to talk to them about at that age. So she starts off, and this is based on, she actually, at the end of the book, there are references and there are resources, and very, very useful resources on books, websites, different types of counseling services. A lot of good resources are here at the end as well. So she talks about the first time, she says, ages 2 to 3. Ages 2 to 3, where is that? Okay. Okay, so she says the first session that you need to have with your child is between the ages of 3 to 5. But before that, she talks about birth to 2 years. Babies explore their body and have an increased awareness of their body, of the body of others. They receive messages about trust and love through physical touching and holding. With diaper changes, boys will at some point begin to touch parts of their body because they're exploring their whole body, which is perfectly normal. So in this case, she talks about, okay, how do you support your child at this age in terms of helping them develop properly? So one important thing, she says, what should you do when your child throws a temper tantrum? What should you do? So your child comes in the masjid in front of everybody, and you say, hey, come and sit down. And that kid starts to scream at the top of their lungs, embarrassing you, and just not quiet, not sitting down, not becoming quiet. What are you supposed to do in this time? Anybody would like to share with us? Try to calm them down. You've been trying that for the last 7 minutes and it's not working. You ignore them, okay? Take him outside. Anybody? Empathize, okay? Yeah, so that's very important, which is to empathize and tell them, hey, I understand that you're upset. I understand that you're upset. So she says every parent will dread the start of a temper tantrums, which are developmentally appropriate around the age of 2. And they call it what? Terrible 2, right? Where these kids, they will press your buttons and they will embarrass you in front of your friends and do the things. It's you feel embarrassed, but they're really being themselves. So she says, it is tough for a child to not have the verbal skills to deal with how they are feeling. That's the problem. They cannot tell you what they're really feeling, so they're doing all of this type of behavior. So let your child explore what they are feeling and acknowledge it by saying, I know you're upset because you wanted to stay or you wanted that toy. And she says that most things can be taken care of by distraction and redirection. So you distract them with something, or you redirect them to something else. So, sometimes if somebody is doing something, a kid, I'll tell them, I want them to go over there, and they're not going over there for some reason. So if I tell them, hey, go over there, they won't go, but I tell them, okay, you know what, I'm going to set a timer on my watch, and I'm going to see how fast you are in reaching that spot, and I will tell you how many seconds it took you. That kid runs like a rocket to get over there. So a lot of times she says that most of your problems, instead of actually criticizing that child, tell them, no, how dare you do that, all of these type of things that unfortunately many of the parents do, most of the times, distraction and redirection are your best friends, and they should be used because that kid is not really being bad. That kid is just not so good at communicating right now. Also, she says that don't label your child. Don't say, hey, you are a naughty girl. You are a troublemaker. These type of labels, whether they are good or they are bad, they actually start to box that child in, and they start to feel really uncomfortable so either they start to live up to that, or if you say, hey, you're a good boy, so if they ever make a mistake, they keep thinking that I'm supposed to be the good boy, and the amount of guilt that they feel as a result of it is going to be troublesome. Is going to cause a lot of problems. So don't label the child, but label the behavior. Instead of saying you are a good boy, say it was really helpful when you put your toys away. So don't label the child, label the act. Now, she says preschoolers, ages 3 to 5 years old, they may like the feeling of touching themselves, different parts of their body. The exploration of body parts continues, and you may see this manifest as playing doctor, right? So this time the child starts to play doctor and gives you checkups on their body. And a sense of gender identity begins to form. So at this time they start to realize, okay, there's something called girls and there's something called boys. They're not really sure about it, but they start to develop a little bit. So she talks about what you should be doing to help them and support them during this time. And one of the things that she says is that you need to tell them this is your first sex ed lesson around this age, because research shows that unfortunately 4 years old is a very common time when molestation starts. So you need to tell your child that, hey, look, if I touch you on your hand, is this a good touch or a bad touch? That's a good touch, no problem. But if I touch you on your bum, is that a good touch or a bad touch? That's a bad touch. So there are certain parts of your body where if anybody touches you, other than mommy and daddy when they're changing your diaper, or a doctor with your mommy and daddy present in front of them, other than that, if anybody touches you in certain places of your body, that's a bad touch. And if anybody does that, you come and you let us know. Because a lot of times, people, may Allah protect us all, who do this type of stuff, when they do it, that child doesn't know, number one, that it's bad, what's happening to them. Number two, that if they even realize that it's bad, in what language do they need to go and tell their parents that this is what's happening? So you need to give them, Assalamu alaikum. How are you doing? Why are your hands so cold?
Because I went outside.
Okay, all right, go ahead. So you need to give them the proper language, and she gives you examples of it as to what, good touch, bad touch, that where you can be touched. Now, the next age she talks about is 5 to 6 years old, and that's when the very, very difficult questions start to come up from the kids, right? For example, Mommy, where did I come from? And then if you give them an answer, then that leads to another few more questions. And you're like, wait, am I supposed to tell them all the details or what? So she says, first of all, listen to your child and understand exactly what they're asking. Your child might be asking you, where do I come from? And they might be thinking geography, and you might be thinking sexuality, right? So if they're asking about which country I come from, you will give them that answer. Don't immediately say, how do I answer it? But she actually gives you, at each age level, she gives you an answer that this is what you can give to your child. So definitely a very good resource to have. So for example, I'll just read out to you one answer for ages 5 to 6. At this age, so if they ask, where do they... Okay, I'm going to skip that because there are kids younger than 5 to 6. At this stage, you also need to give them a little bit more detail about what is inappropriate touch. And you need to also give them a little bit more details. She talks about how to strengthen the parent-child bond. And she says, look, remember that connection must come before correction. Connection must come before correction. If you are a parent that's always chastising your child, if you are a parent that's always criticizing, saying, hey, why did you do this? Why did you do that? Then that's not really a good, positive parenting style, and it's not going to bring about a lot of benefit. That kid may just listen to you just to kind of get you off their back, but it's not necessarily that they will be corrected from doing that again. She talks about school curriculum at this age because in some places, at elementary level, they add certain level of education. At middle school level, they add certain level of education. So she says that what happened in Canada, she's from Canada, she says that a similar incident happened a couple of years ago when Muslim parents in Ontario, Canada, protested the new education curriculum, which had this part in it, a curriculum that was approved by some local Toronto imams. So some imams were involved in that, and they had approved it. But some parents, they were just too gung-ho about it, and they went and they protested it, and they created a big problem. And the parents were very vocal, and they said that we don't want our kids to learn about LGBTQ stuff. Now, the issue about that, she says, look, what we have to do is we have to teach our children that there are people who do things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like, but that doesn't mean that they are not human beings, and that doesn't mean that we should not be kind and caring and gentle and nice towards them, as we are to anybody who drinks alcohol or who does any other sin. We are supposed to be kind and gentle to all people. So we do have to teach them that, hey, this is something, because if it's not, basically she keeps talking about that if you don't, so you have a cup, if you don't fill up this cup with pure, positive material, it will fill up with negative, impure stuff. So it's better for you to fill it up with the good and leave it full, as opposed to leaving it empty and leaving it for shaitan to fill with all of his type of stuff. And this is unfortunately a story that I've heard from people where even people who went off and they started to have an immoral type of lifestyle in this LGBTQ stuff, one of them actually told me, he said, you know what, it started off as him just not knowing any better. He just thought that this is the way to do it. That's it. And he had no other person to teach them that this is the right way, this is the wrong way. So then she talks about school age children, ages 9 to 11, and how different behavior starts to appear. At this age, a 9-year-old kid, 10-year-old kid, 11-year-old kid, they are very well aware of their bodies. They are also aware of other people's bodies, and they are starting to explore more. They are starting to get certain type of feelings of arousal. So she says that, you know what, this is the stuff that you need to be talking to them and teaching them about that stuff. And then she talks about puberty. And of course, she has an entire section on things that happen at puberty that you need to talk to your child about. And then what do you talk to your child about from ages 12 to 14 years old? And then after that, basically late teens, 15 to 17 years old. Now, one of the things that I would say is that something that we need to do, we are seeing a lot of problem in, is that 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, even sometimes younger, but generally 15 onwards, kids are starting to develop relationships. And they are, finding somebody at school and they're getting attached to them. And then initially it starts off as a just, very platonic relationship, just talking. Then it goes to more and more and more. And of course, their bodies are developing and their hormones are kicking and there is a strong desire. And when they find the opportunity, they fall into stuff. So what we need to talk about, and what she gives a very detailed lesson about, is that we actually need to talk to our kids about healthy relationships versus unhealthy relationships. And she talks about what we were talking about a little bit in Jummah today, that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us not to have this type of boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, it is not that, na'udhu billah, Allah just gets some pleasure out of seeing you suffer. But because it is good for your own self for you to not get involved in this. If you can actually have this conversation, it talks about, for example, if a teenager were to become expecting, what will be the effects of that on their life? To remind them that, hey, you know what? Allah has told you not to engage in this, because if you engage in this and you're thinking, I got everything under control, and it doesn't take a lot for something to go out of control, if that happens, your whole life is over. And at that time, she says, you know what, you're going to see your friends going to school, enjoying themselves, having free time after they're done with their homework, and you are going to be responsible for a child day and night. Most likely, you won't be able to continue to study anymore because you have to take care of a child. You'll probably have to get a job. If you can actually explain to them that, hey, the road that you're starting on, it leads down this path, then that child, but again, there must be a lot of trust built up between the parent and the child, that child believes that my parents are telling me in my own best interest. A lot of times, because there's no connection before, the child feels that my dad or my mom is just being old school. They don't know what life really is like. And we really are not friends. He doesn't know what my life is all about. Or she doesn't know what my life is all about. So she says that with regards to this type of education, start when they are young. Remove stigma. That you can tell your child that, hey, if you have any questions, you can come and ask me. We will not shame you, that how dare you ask this question. And I tell you personally, when I was 14 years old, I started to learn about this stuff, and I was, a very active in the masjid and with Muslim youth. And basically, while other peers are having girlfriends, so I come home and I tell my dad, I said, Dad, I think I want to get married. And you won't believe how much I was shamed. Because they're like, don't you have any shame that you're asking to be married? I'm like, yeah, what's wrong with that? That's what the Prophet did. He encouraged young people to do so. No one really explained to me that, okay, well, we understand where you're coming from, but right now she talks about, for example, that when your brain really develops. And she says that when a young child comes, a really young child, you explain to them that, hey, your brain is not fully yet developed. So most likely, the relationship that you find yourself in right now, as your brain, your personality changes, you will not like that same person, and that same person will not like you. So you need to grow up a little bit older for you to become mature enough to really have developed. And remember the Prophet ﷺ, he encouraged young people to get married if they can. But if they cannot, he said, you should fast. You should fast. So the Prophet ﷺ realizes that some people will be able to do it, some people will not be able to do it. So he gives proper indication, proper guidance on that. She says that you should become an askable adult. Your child should be able to come to mom or dad. Generally, of course, older girls will connect more with mom. Older boys will connect more with dad. That you should be an askable adult, that if they have any question, any concern in their mind, they should be able to come and pull you aside and say, hey, Dad, I learned about this such and such thing. What do you think about that? Or Dad, I like this person. Or Mom, I like this person. This person sent me a message. What am I supposed to do about that? Be an askable adult and don't shame them. Look out for teachable moments. She says that anytime you see something inappropriate out in the public, on the media, on billboards, then you use that moment to actually reinforce the message that you have been given your child. That, look, you see, we are not supposed to do this because so and so, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So she talks about, for example, pornography. She says that, look, you tell your child that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made this relationship a beautiful relationship. And it is done, this relationship is established with someone with honor, with respect, in front of, all the community get together, they celebrate, there's, food, there's mithai, there's all that type of stuff. And it's a beginning of a beautiful lifelong relationship. As opposed to two strangers that are doing something which may even be hurtful to them. And it's not something that will bring any type of happiness to a person. And this is something that we see all the time, and I would tell this to young people who may be struggling with this, is that we have people that come and take their shahada all the time. And this person, before they took their shahada, they did not have any restrictions on any type of relationship they could have. They were open to anything and everything, but they did not find any happiness in that. They want to give all of that up, and they want to come and live like a Muslim because that's where peace of heart is. That's where serenity is. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what He has created us to be. So the guidance that He has given us, it fits us exactly. If this is a computer from one company, if you try to use instructions from a different company and say, let me try to figure something out, it doesn't work. But the person who made it can tell you what the right way of using this is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us, and it is for our own benefit. She says that this act, it should not be portrayed in a negative way. It should be portrayed in a positive way when it is done within the guidelines set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So actually, you encourage your child to look forward to when the halal will become a reality for them, and it's a positive thing. She talks about keep the message positive, model a healthy relationship. So, parents, the relationship you have in front of the kids, that would be a good model for them to look up to. Remind them that Allah is watching them and wants to reward them, right? So we always say, look, Allah is watching you and He will punish you. She says, tell them Allah is watching you, that how difficult time you're going through, how you're seeing your friends going through this, enjoying themselves, and you are holding yourself back. Allah is watching you and He is going to reward you for it. As opposed to, Allah is watching you. If you fall, Allah is going to punish you. So a little bit, just tweaking the message will actually have a significant impact. Remind your teen that there are 7 people whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will shade on the day of judgment, right? The famous hadith, the Prophet said, there are 7 people who will be given the shade of the throne of Allah, 7 types of people. And one of them is a person who is openly given an opportunity to engage in this tempting act, but that person, after having no reason to step away, like it's not like, there was somebody stopping them or they had complete autonomy to do so, and they said, no, I fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So remind your teen that if you withhold yourself, then you will be from among these people as well. Also, she says that one of the things that is out there that shaitan uses is that the kids are told that, hey, everybody is doing it. Everybody is doing it. And she says, actually, research shows that everybody is not doing it. And usually the kids that have a good relationship with their parents and they have had education on this matter at home or at school, they are the ones who are not engaging in that. But it is, others who don't have a good relationship at home with their parents, or they have not engaged in this type of education, are the ones who may be involved in it. Also discuss their naturally increasing desire. So if your child is in that age, we have all been through that age. So if you actually acknowledge it and you tell them, hey, I know how you feel. You know how vindicating it feels that somebody understands what you're going through. I tell you an example. I went to the doctor yesterday, and those of you who know that I have lifelong sniffling issues and like runny nose and all that stuff. And my doctor said, hey, your septum is deviated. And it felt such a relief that I'm not crazy. I really do have some reason for why I have this issue. So it feels so comforting that somebody understands what you're going through, whether it's something small or something big. Just like for a child, if you tell them, hey, I know that you wanted that toy. I can understand how much you love that toy, but this is not the right time. We can't have it right now. We'll do it another time, or just that somebody acknowledges. So with your child, tell them, hey, I understand how you feel. And she says, tell them stories about other people that you may have heard. It might even be your own story of someone who went through this and how they were patient, what tactics they used to protect themselves. But to acknowledge that, it will be really, really helpful, because a lot of kids, they would say, man, my parents are just telling me don't do anything. Don't talk to any girls. Don't talk to any boys. But my parents don't understand what the world out there is like. They don't know what I'm feeling. So this would be very helpful. Also, she says, as we mentioned earlier, talk about healthy relationships and marriage. Talk about healthy relationships and marriage, and remind them to make dua to resist temptation and to meet a righteous spouse. So you make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that keep making dua, that, oh Allah, grant me a righteous spouse. A spouse where all of this will be, the reward of all of this struggle will be a righteous spouse, where what I was being stopped from, now it actually becomes an act of ibadah. What a beautiful life that is going to be. So remind them to make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants you, and encourage them to be regular in their prayers. She had 2 sons, and she said, I used to tell my sons, take care of your prayers, and your prayers will take care of you. So I think that we probably spent enough time on this. So I would basically, in the end, again, reiterate that there are some very good resources at the end of this book. And I would highly recommend parents to get this book, order a copy of it. I wish I had like an Amazon affiliate link, so each one that you buy a copy, I get a little, little cha-ching in my vacation fund as well. But I don't have one, so inshallah, just order from wherever you like, and share it with others as well. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it beneficial for all of us. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. If anybody has any questions or comments or suggestions, please share. Yes. How to talk to your Muslim child about the act, adulthood. Firoza Osman. Firoza Osman. Okay, any other? I saw some hand. Yes, brother. So that is a general parenting issue, which is that both parents need to be on the same page, and that is really a big problem. So if you are planning this campaign at home, part of it would be to first talk to your spouse and say, hey, look, so here's the problem. Sometimes you have one parent who is all up to date with this type of stuff, and the other parent lives 100 years back in time. And they say, no, this is not appropriate. We're not going to talk about this. And the thing is that every parent that has taken that approach, they have been in my office for counseling about their issues, and they have had issues. I mean, countless cases of that, where they come and they say, okay, what do I do now? And I tell them, I wish that you came to me before. I don't know how much I can help this child of yours, but do you have any younger kids? They say yes. I tell them, we have more hope where we can maybe do the right thing with them and perhaps save them. And this one, all we can do is make dua and try different efforts. Maybe they will work, maybe they won't work. So it's really important to maybe, before you do it, have your spouse read this book. And as you read it, and then say, okay, this is how we're going to tackle this. So it is really a good point that we should be all on the same page. Anybody else would like to share? Any comments, questions, suggestions? If not,